Hi, I'm James, and recently I did a video regarding the Challenger 2s being sent to the Ukraine and asking why. Now interestingly, since I made that video, it's been confirmed that 14 have been sent, complete with 2 armoured recovery vehicles. So that's where we are with that. But I thought I'd look a little bit at German support, because Germany, depending on which statistic you use, is the second or third largest supplier. The US is well ahead of everybody else, and then it depends whether you count just monetary donations or whether you actually count military aid as to whether Germany is second or third. If you just count the actual equipment supplied, then Germany is actually the second largest supplier. Britain takes over if you bring in the monetary value to buy equipment. So it's quite an interesting little bit. Now, looking at what equipment the Germans have provided, the latest announcement is they're going to provide 40 Marder 1s. Now the Marder, the 1 is a bit spurious in a way because the Marder 2 never made it into production. Instead the Puma has come along to replace it. Now the Marder 1A3 and A4 are virtually identical. The only difference is the A4 has the option to encrypt the radios. There is an A5 version which was designed for anti-mine warfare, developed for use in places like Afghanistan. It's often forgot that German troops were deployed to Afghanistan. So it is the latest effectively version of the Marder. Very few of the A5s exist. And they're due to be supplied by March 23, so quite a short time to get them there, but then again there won't be a lot of training involved. Now altogether Germany's given €2 billion worth of support in 2022, and 2023 it's given a value of 2.2 billion. And I just thought I'd pick up a couple of the bits and pieces that they have supplied before we look at a bit more depth about the German sort of policies. There's a Patriot missile system on the way, and RCH-155 wheeled howitzers, 18 of them. This has become a very artillery-based war, so I'm not surprised to see howitzers. Other equipment, there are the Biber bridge layers, 3 of those with potentially another 13. 15 Burj Panzer II recovery vehicles. Now that was an interesting one to spot. 1 IRIS-T SAM, not something I'm particularly familiar with, and I've been trying to trace the details on these. 70mm rocket launchers which are laser guided, mounted on pickup trucks, 20 of them. Now if we think of the northern offensive that the Ukrainians undertook, that's the sort of almost the ideal vehicle for when you get the breakthrough. Really interestingly, this one did hit the news. 30 Gepards, which are the anti-aircraft vehicle, and 7 more of them are alleged to be on the way. 5 MLRSs, 14 Panzerhowitzer 2000 artillery systems, 30 MG3 armoured recovery vehicles, 50 Dingo MRAPs, and there are on top of that lots of soft skins and similar sorts of vehicles. Some other little bits I spotted were 3,200 manpads. Now interestingly, 2,700 of them are Strela 2s. I'm assuming these are left over from former DDR stocks, and 500 Stingers. So was interesting. Panzerfaust 3s, 900 of them with 3,000 rounds of ammunition, and over 9,000 RWG Matador missiles. 22 million rounds of ammunition, and very interestingly, spares for the MiG-29 and the Mi-24. So I'm coming to the conclusion that the Germans are digging into their really old stockpiles. I thought they'd got rid of most of the XDDR equipment, but it appears that there seems to be a fair bit still in stores. I know they also have Leopard 1s in store. The Panzermörser, which is the M113 with the mortar in the back. So there is a lot of old kit there that could actually be used. And they've also, and my German isn't very good, so please excuse me, brought in the Ringtausch program. Now the idea with this was countries send equipment to Ukraine and the Germans replace what they sent with more modern equipment. Unfortunately, it hasn't worked brilliantly, as the countries have generally wanted a little bit more modern equipment than the Germans have been wanting to give. But Czechoslovakia has sent an undisclosed number of T-72M1s. Slovenia have sent M55s, 28 of them. I was quite bemused they were replaced by trucks, so that did amuse me. Denmark has sent M113 G3DKs, which are the M113 upgraded by the Germans. They've sent 54 of them. The BMP-1A1, which was the original BMP-1 upgraded to German standards. I believe it fitted reversing mirrors and better brakes, for example. 40 of them had been supplied to Greece and they've now been sent on, with Germany replacing them. And Slovakia, 30 BVP ones. So there is quite a substantial amount of German equipment gone. Now, whenever we talk about Germany, what we obviously do have to consider is history in this context. February 2022 saw a seismic change in Germany, and I think that's fairly obvious. Up until that point, Germany had said they would never send weapons to war zones. That was their policy. And Germany had tried to work with Russia, using the argument trade was the best weapon. Unfortunately, that obviously didn't work. So the kit started flowing at that point. Now, there is a problem here. One of the biggest problems for the Germans is the fact that since the end of the Cold War, the German military has declined tremendously. They really have now got issues with equipment, and this is one of the reasons behind Lamprecht's resignation, the defence minister. A 100 billion euro investment policy was brought into place. She seems to have struggled with being able to apply that, and the German equipment isn't modernising fast enough. I've seen reports that they're struggling with ammunition, and worryingly, the Puma APC that I refer, or IFV, depending on how you want to refer to it, I referred to earlier, on the previous exercise, all 18 were withdrawn due to technical difficulties. So the Germans are still relying on the Marder, and obviously pulling this kit out to give to somebody else is going to have an impact. Britain has said something very similar. Bear in mind the Challenger 3, replacement for the Challenger 2, the plan is not to have it fully replaced until about 2030. So we're only talking there 200 and odd units being upgraded. It's not a fast process. The Germans are having similar sorts of problems. So there is that aspect to consider. It was worth noting when the AS-90s were being sent from Britain, it's being said 8 of them are going from what's immediately available. The remainder are not immediately available. In other words, they're coming out of mothballs and will take time to prepare. And we've seen that with the Russians. The Russians have had similar problems. So in Germany then, what's been the arguments against sending weapons? I mean, historically and culturally, since 1945, there's probably a fairly obvious reason there. But looking at what's being said, the things that they've been brought up in argument was the time it takes to train somebody. Now, I think that at the start of the war was a fairly reasonable comment. Nobody expected the war to go on like this. And realistically, you're talking probably 3 months to train people up. So you're talking, let's say we can accelerate that slightly using experience that they've got in previous systems. We're probably talking 2 months. So kit coming in now will be just about ready for the spring offensive. So the training aspect is something to consider. Logistically, there needs to be the logistic backup, but we've seen how much the Germans have poured in already. It's not going to be that difficult or that much different to train and logistically support vehicles that are new to the system. They've proved that they can do that with things like the Leopards. So it wouldn't be a huge step with that. An interesting one that I hadn't considered was the capturing of a German tank could play to Putin's domestic propaganda, in particular that he's now fighting NATO. I mean, given he's already saying that, I can't see how that one is really going to stand up now. And probably most significantly was the fact that nobody else was delivering. Now this is why, to me, the Challenger 2 is such a big thing. We've seen over the last couple of weeks this escalation, sending Marders, sending Bradleys, sending the AMX-10 RCs, and then the Challenger. Now the Germans aren't the lead, and I think that may be significant. Germany can then be seen as following other people's lead, not taking the lead, and particularly moving eastwards. You can see where their thought process comes from. Ben Wallace, in his speech where he actually confirmed the Challengers were going, actually said this is opening the doors for the Germans. So I think the Challenger 2 has been highly significant. It's given the Germans now that opportunity to say, yes, we will help support, rather than we will send on our own initiative. The Germans have always specified that they wanted to send, very simply, defensive equipment. And if you look at their equipment, things like the tents, the heaters, sleeping bags, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The anti-aircraft equipment can definitely be seen as defensive, particularly a lot of it is usable against drones like the Leopards. Some of the kit I find a bit strange if they're saying that, such as the rocket firing pickups. I would have said that the way the Ukraine has used them is more offensive. However, they could easily be used in a similar way to the way that Humvees with tow missiles were used in a more defensive role by the US. So there is a little bit there. How you define the difference between the two, I don't know. I think perhaps a lot of it is a psychological issue there for the Germans. And realistically, there was a lovely phrase that was used with German rearmament, which is Zeitenwende, which basically means historical turning point. I can see that the Challengers going to the Ukraine, followed by Leopard 2s, will be that historical turning point in German approaches. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please click on the like button below so that I know what people like and I know what to make more of. Alternatively, if you've enjoyed it and think you'd like to see more, please click on the subscribe button. That way you get notified by YouTube whenever I bring out a new video. And you never know, there might be something in there that you hadn't considered, because I do cover a variety of things on the channel. And finally, if you have a little bit of cash going, I now have a Patreon account. I'm always looking for patrons, because at the end of the day, let's be perfectly honest, it's a good way for me to get a little bit of money that will use to buy review items or to travel to museums and so on. I don't put a huge amount on that. At the minute, all we've got is one tier charging £1 a month, which just, as I said, helps cover my costs. See you soon.